Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America on the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network. Great to have you with us on the program today. As mentioned, our special guest is Motez Bishara, author of the new book on gaining access into premier basketball games across North America on the cheap. The book is called Beating the NBA, Tales from a Frugal Fan, available at Amazon, about how to get tickets to NBA games, even playoff games, without breaking the bank. And he comes to us today on This Week in America from outside of America in London. Motez, welcome to the program. Great to have you with us.
Thank you, Rick.
Love the book. So much to talk about. Let's talk about how this whole thing got started for you. And basically, we go back to when you're in college. Sort of the foundation for the book was laid at that time. In the Boston area, a Celtic fan during the height of the Larry Bird era there, so tickets were difficult to get a hold of, and you had to be pretty creative to come up with tickets to watch the Celtics play.
You bet. That's exactly right. I actually grew up in New York, where the scalping culture is pretty rife there. So it wasn't unusual for me to think about, just rocking up to the venue and just buying tickets off the street. And by the time I got to college in Boston, I was a huge NBA fan. It was kind of at the tail end of the Bird era, but it was still impossible to get tickets to the old rickety Garden, which only seated about 14,000 people. You either had to have been a season ticket holder, which usually lasted, 10, 15, 20 years or a generation, or you basically had to just hit the streets. And as a freshman in college, I was operating on a low budget, and I had to kind of sharpen my tools and figure out how to get in and get the best seats I could possibly get for the cheapest possible prices.
It's interesting, and the book is called Beating the NBA, Tales from a Frugal Fan. Our guest on the program tonight is Motez Bishara. The book is available all across the country. You can check it out at Amazon. His website is thefrugalfan.com. Let's talk a little bit about the premise for the book, which is basically you were out saying the ticket system in the United States is, in most sports, especially the NBA, is broken, and you were out to buy tickets and buy them at a bargain.
Yes, exactly right. So I noticed that just anecdotally, I heard a lot of people saying, I would love to take my kids to a game, or I'd love to go to a game, but it's just crazy. I can't afford it anymore. The tickets are just completely out of reach. And I kind of shared my experiences with people, and it opened their eyes. And I thought, look, I know for a fact that very often the price printed on the ticket has absolutely no relation whatsoever with the actual market price of the ticket, meaning what the ticket is worth on the day of the game if you take into account all the supply and demand factors. So I know personally, as a conscientious consumer, I don't want to pay more than market value for a ticket, and ideally I'd like to pay less. And very often I could.
One of the lessons you learned early on, and we touched upon it when you were a college student trying to get into games in Boston to watch the Celtics, you bought a ticket. I think you paid like $40. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, last stand in Boston, highly sought after ticket. You bought a ticket and then realized the seat wasn't all that hot, and you really learned something about, I really need to take a seating chart and make sure what I'm getting is a seat where I can see the entire court.
Yeah, that wasn't fun. The old Garden had a lot of obstructed view seats. So I didn't realize the overhang was blocking literally half the view of the court. Now, in today's NBA, you don't really have obstructed view seats anymore, thankfully. But you definitely should take a seating chart every time you go to the arena if you're going to buy from somebody off the street. And you just pop it up on your phone. It's very easy. Very often, scalpers actually will carry laminated ones with them, too, and they'll show you where you're going to be sitting. So it's good. It's way more transparent these days than it was 20 years ago. Let's put it that way.
Well, so many new stadiums and new arenas. I can remember one of the first times I went to Tiger Stadium in Detroit, and I'm behind like a column. And you look at the ticket a little closer, it's like a restricted view, which is why the ticket was so cheap. But yeah, probably not a big problem anymore, especially with some of the new stadiums and arenas. But in fact, that's sort of rule number one: is you're talking with a scalper. Take the ticket. You say you don't forcibly grab it from them, but you take it, you look at it, and you're looking for a number of things when you actually have the ticket. What should we be looking for when we're talking with the scalper? We have the ticket in hand. What should we do to make sure that we're actually getting a legitimate ticket?
Right. Kind of feel it out, feel the texture of it, funny enough. See if it's kind of like a thick kind of institutionally printed out ticket and not something somebody has like photographed at home, because I've had that happen before where somebody tried to sell me a ticket and the ink was so cheap that they were actually sticking together. So I kind of just laughed him off, and he just crumpled. He was just like, okay, forget it. But A, make sure that the ticket feels legit. B, look at the price printed on the ticket. Therefore, you have something to gauge what you'll be bidding. And I try and bid low, about 50% of what the ticket is worth. And these guys will often laugh and go, no way, get out of here, whatever. But they will very usually come and meet you somewhere halfway between 50% of what the ticket's face value is and what the face value is. So, if it's a $100 ticket, if you end up paying $65, $70, $75, that's a pretty decent deal. Also, if you happen to be going with a friend, you're at an advantage. Now, very, very often I went alone, so I wasn't able to use this tactic much. But take a friend with you, and if you have any reasonable doubt that the ticket isn't real, tell the guy, listen, I'll wait with you. My friend will go in with one of the tickets. If it's legit, he'll call me and I'll hand you the money. And more often than not, they will say no problem. If a guy says, no, there's no way I'll do that, just move on to the next guy. Don't feel any pressure to deal with somebody.
Motez Bishara, our guest on the program. He's the author of the new book, Beating the NBA, Tales from a Frugal Fan. You can get all the information at Amazon. His website is thefrugalfan.com. It's an excellent read, visiting nearly all 30 NBA cities, getting in on the cheap. I lived in London, so this required a number of trips back and forth across the country. In dealing with a scalper, it's interesting, and I have fallen victim to this myself a couple of times. Once you get there, you're anxious to get the ticket. Let's get this out of the way, get the ticket, get in the stadium, and we can watch warm-ups, that type of thing. And you say you really shouldn't buy from the first group that you come across. Like as soon as you get off the subway, there will be people selling tickets. As soon as you get out of the parking lot, you really should wait a little bit and talk to some people before you actually make a purchase.
Absolutely. You need to feel out what the market is doing. The guy who's waiting right by the subway or by the car park, they don't want you to know what the market is doing closer to the arena or the stadium. They want to get you early and say, hey, listen, you could get this close to face value. This is a great deal. Then you rock up to the stadium and you see guys are selling at a quarter face value because there's too much stock out there. So I would, take a deep breath, ask him how much he's selling for, and say, okay, look, I'll come back. You'll still be here. I'm going to walk around, do a lap around the arena, see what other people are selling for, and I'll come back. And that's part of the advantage of going a little bit early, too. I'm not a big fan of going after the game starts. I prefer to have the option of waiting it out if I want. And normally, half hour to an hour before the game, there's a lot more inventory floating around. If you wait till right before tip-off or after, there's not going to be much left, especially for the big games. You want to see Carmelo, you want to see LeBron, you want to see Kobe or these guys. There's only going to be a few seats left, and they're going to be asking for hundreds and hundreds of dollars. So get there early, and you might get lucky.
There was a great story where you're talking about getting tickets in Orlando for a Magic and a Heat game. This would have been a couple of years ago. Dwight Howard was with the Magic. The Heat, of course, LeBron was there. Intrastate rivalry. It's interesting because it tells us a lot of times we think this is a hot game. I'm not even going to try to get tickets. You go down to a celebrity-studded game in terms of NBA celebrities. You go down and you end up sitting front row.
Yeah, I sat about 10 rows up, right on the baseline, but I sat in the friends and family section for the Magic. And so it exactly how I just described it. I showed up early to the game. I showed up probably 2 hours early, and there was a commotion outside. I mean, there were bands playing. There were newscasters outside. It was a big deal. And on StubHub, tickets were going for about $500 in the lower bowl. And I was nervous, I'll admit. I thought, do I know what I'm doing? I might be in over my head here. And for me, the stakes were really high, too, because I was flying in for these games or taking the train or whatever, and I'd only be in town for 24 hours, and I had a point to prove. So it was a big test for me. And I talked to some of the scalpers, some who literally, were just cracking up, thinking, there's no way you're going to get in here for less than, $300 just to walk into the arena. And I found a couple guys that said, all right, look, I'm going to go grab dinner, grab a beer, and I'll come back and I'll see what's out there. And so I did that, and sure enough, I came back about, I'd say probably 20, 30 minutes before tip-off, and there was a guy who was kind of a real chubby guy. He looked like Chris Farley. He recognized me, and he had just bought a ticket off somebody walking in, and he said, hey, I got something for you. It's exactly what you were looking for. And I said, okay, great. And he said, it's in the lower bowl, great seat. He had a seating chart with him. I looked up where I was going to be sitting. The ticket actually had no face value on it because it was a comp ticket, as it turned out. And we just started bargaining. Then it was just it was a battle of the wills. Who was going to cave first? And he said 150, and I said 80, and I kept holding my ground. He kept coming down 140, 130. It was almost like an auction, and then some other scalpers started kind of hovering around like buzzards, waiting to make other offers to me. And then he just caved, and I gave him $85, and I couldn't believe it. I was on such a high. I walked through the door, once you hear that scanner ring, then all of a sudden, you relax and you walk in. And I sat down. I had time to get a beer and popcorn, whatever. And LeBron was doing warm-ups right in front of me. And then a couple of minutes later, these guys walk in. This tall, very well-dressed guy said, hey, how much did you pay for that? And I thought, hey, wow, that's kind of an aggressive question. And he said, well, that's my seat. I just sold it. I said, oh, okay, cool. And I said, hey, I paid $85. And he said, oh, damn. I should have sold it for more money, And it was funny because he said, my cousin plays for the Magic. And I said, who's your cousin? He said, Jason Richardson. So I was like, oh, wow, well, that's pretty cool. I get to sit next to guys who know NBA players, who, know the ins and outs of the teams. And it was fun. We hung out, and I heard all about the Jay Rich and the Magic, and LeBron scored 51 points that game. So not only did I get a great feel, I saw the game of my life, really. I mean, it was a phenomenal event.
Is there anything like seeing an NBA game in person? Generally, you are close. Obviously, it's indoors. You're playing in an arena. And even if your seats are a ways away from the court, you're fairly close. They don't wear helmets. They're very vulnerable in terms of actually seeing who they are. Is there anything that matches that in sports?
You're exactly right, Rich. I don't think that there is anything that matches that in sports. I'm an Arsenal season ticket holder here in London, and my seats are actually in the front row in the corner, and still, you're pretty far removed from the action, except when they're taking corner kicks. I love the intimacy of NBA action, NBA arenas. Even though the arenas have gotten bigger and glitzier over the years, I still feel like you're really close to the game, and sometimes players are literally falling on you.
Yes.
They're jumping for loose balls, they're diving. You can hear them talk. Often, guys sitting around the courtside, they talk smack to the guys. Sometimes it gets them in trouble. Even in these playoffs, Joe Camino, he got into an altercation in Miami. So for me, it's definitely my favorite event to attend live. More than baseball, more than football, soccer, everything else.
It's an excellent book. We've got a couple minutes left in the program. Beating the NBA, Tales from a Frugal Fan. Our guest is Motez Bishara, coming to us from London. That's his home base, and he traveled back and forth across the ocean to be here to try to conduct this experiment to get in cheaply to NBA games around the country. His website is thefrugalfan.com. We've concentrated a lot on scalpers because as we get out there, that's obviously the best place to buy tickets the day of the game on location because these are basically sold-out games across the board. Mm-hmm. A great chapter in the book about scalping etiquette. We find out these are like nomads. I mean, they basically carpool from game site to game site. But in the couple minutes left, let's talk about online. We've heard a lot about StubHub comes to mind. We've heard a lot about, and teams have sort of embraced working with them. Talk a little bit about the secondary market and if that's really a good way for us as consumers to save money getting tickets.
It's always my first option. I always go on the secondary market to see what it's doing. Very often you can get very good deals. Sometimes you can literally buy tickets for $1. $1, and then you pay printout fees for StubHub and whatnot. And if you're 3-4 people, it averages down. And you pay literally just a few bucks to get into the arena. And it's just a good way of gauging what the market is doing. I also really like going on Craigslist. It's important to see how many season ticket holders are just dumping their stock before the game. I would prefer to buy off a season ticket holder directly, than deal with scalpers on the street if I have that option. And when you do, make sure you get their phone number, make sure you call them, make sure they're on a legitimate phone and they sound like reasonable people. Use your street smarts and best judgment, because the internet is full of scammers too. So be careful with Craigslist, but if you deal with them directly, you can almost always get a good deal. And season ticket holders, they just want to get something back for their seats that they're not going to use. If the arena seats 20,000 people, you can bet 500 to 1,000 people can't make it on the day of the game. So there's always stuff out there.
If you held stock in Ticketmaster, would you be selling right now?
That's a great question. Ticketmaster is also the owner of Live Nation.
Yes.
So they also deal with a lot of live events, and they sign artists like Jay-Z and Madonna to huge events. They also operate a lot of arenas. So it's not a pure ticketing business. So it's a little bit of a complicated question. I think Ticketmaster, has a sustainable business. It just has to adjust. It has to adjust accordingly. It has management that is capable. They just need to kind of adjust with the times, and they're doing that, but I feel like they're always kind of a little bit of a step behind.
Beating the NBA, Tales from a Frugal Fan. Our guest on the program, Motez Bishara. Got about 30 seconds left in the show. You talk a lot. In fact, you've got a great interview in the book in talking about dynamic pricing, which we've seen over the last couple of years. If you live in Detroit, you want to go watch the Yankees, you'll pay more than if you go watch them play Houston, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Is that sort of where we're going with this?
Yes, exactly. Tickets are going to be more and more reflective of the actual event, even down to who's pitching that night, and whether a star player is playing or not playing that night. So it's really going to be a lot more micro reflective of what the market is doing. If there's a big, great empty swath of seats, I feel like they should really lower prices, but the problem is then you're going to upset a lot of season ticket holders. So there is still that problem, which teams are going to have in terms of dynamic pricing, but they're trying their best to change the system. So we'll see how it goes. But as fans, we can always get better deals out there. I just want everyone to know that. It's
an excellent book. It's a guide to actually how to get better deals out there. Beating the NBA, Tales from a Frugal Fan. Information at Amazon. Of course, the website, thefrugalfan.com. Motez Bishara has been our guest on This Week in America. Great book. Thank you so much for taking time and sharing your escapades with us. I can't wait for the second book to come out. So thank you for being with us on the show.
That's very kind. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
You're listening to This Week in America on the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network.